Secularists have no moral authority or autonomy, so they can't really make ought claims. They don't make any sense.
My preference is
democracy. Oh, your preference. So your moral claim is your preference? I have epistemic justification for knowledge. You do not have epistemic justification for knowledge. It's my preference that I rule everybody. What's wrong with that?
All morality is subjective. My preference would be, for example, that people respect someone's like preferred pronoun. My personal sense of morality to the world.
You just got done saying people ought to follow it. What are you talking about?
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be watching one of the most brutal debates I have ever seen, if probably the most brutal debate I've actually ever seen. This one is between Andrew Wilson and some liberal, and it's like watching some amateur fighter being forced to go 15 rounds with Khabib Nurmagomedov. But instead of finishing the fight, Khabib decides to repeatedly take him down, ground and pound him, choke him out, and then when he's just at the point of unconsciousness, he lets him go, stands the fight back up, and then they just do it all over and over again.
I want to take him down, speak with him, you know, slap him. This is what I want to do.
And we're going to review the first 20 minutes or so, but this goes for 4 hours in total, and it's just a bloodbath the entire time. You can find it on the crucible.video where they've got all of the long form debates. I'll leave the link below. So we're going to be going through reviewing the arguments, the debate techniques, and where this guy falls short and how Andrew exposes it. So with that, let's get into the first bit.
I'm come here for smash this guy.
So for me, secularism allows a system like liberal democracy where you can have multiple religious ideologies or otherwise philosophies intermingle and exist within the same system.
Oh, was secularists who brought us that?
I'm not trying to convert you. I'm not trying to convert anybody else. I have found my own philosophy and sense of morality that works for me. And if you get that from Christianity, that's fine. That's good. That can exist in a secular structure.
Yeah, I know. But what if?
Why I favor?
Wait a second. Wait a second.
I don't think it's because. Let me just real quick.
What happened?
Religion or another is going to be able to successfully convert everybody around them. It just doesn't work that way. There's no historical precedent to suggest that that's a sustainable system.
What's a sustainable system? You cut out for a second.
This idea that you should force through legislation or extreme coercion or violence, force people to adopt your religious framework. I favor a system where many religions can flourish and communities can benefit because of this flourishment, and secular democracy can do that.
This is #1 bullshit.
Well, then let us go back to the roots of secular democracy. Was the secular democracy, which you just appealed to in the United States, brought to you by secularists or was it brought to you by Christians?
If you're talking about the founding fathers, many of them obviously believed in the Christian God.
Which ones didn't?
And it was a spectrum. Well,
Name one that didn't.
Probably all of them. But there was a spectrum of belief at that time. You had people that practiced these orthodox versions of their religion, and then you had a spectrum go all the way to deism, which at the time was emerging as this way more popular philosophy. It was taught to the intellectuals at that time. It was booming in popularity. And so when we talk about like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, these people believed in sort of an absentee landlord version of God. So even if they practiced
So wait, they believe in God?
Christian, yes.
Oh, well, that's so strange.
If people, I don't know why you're saying that's
because
strange.
You said that secularists brought this to us. Doesn't sound like secularists brought it to us.
You can have religion in a secular system. A secular system does not mean...
But that wasn't your claim. Your claim was that secularists brought us this system.
I don't think I ever said that.
You did. In fact, I can tell you right back what you did say.
Guys, just before we carry on, I wanted to remind you to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It helps me out massively. And also, the Christmas catalog for the reality-based store is only up until the 5th of December. You guys can get yourself one of many of our Christmas designs, the Kamala Harris Stealing Christmas Ho 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 design. And also, we've got our counterculture merch. This is the perfect gift for somebody that you know that is just based. So all those links are going to be below, realitybasedstore.com. Support the channel whilst getting yourself some of the most based merch in the whole entire world bar none. Let's get back to the video.
You asked me what secularism does for me. I never told you that atheists, I never told you that atheists gave us secularism.
Okay,
You just
great.
mentioned straw man a moment ago.
No, that wasn't a straw man. You said the reason
that.
you embrace secularism is because it allows for enlightenment, egalitarian values. Very strange, because it was not secularists who brought enlightenment, egalitarian values, sir.
What does that matter?
Well, it matters because you're kind of trying to make the bold claim that Christianity itself is adversarial to these values. Now, it should be adversarial, but the Protestants here have not ever been traditionally adversarial. They were the ones who brought it.
Your version of Christianity, a theocratic state, something...
When have I ever asked for a theocratic state?
Maybe I misinterpreted. If you could tell me what your ideal form of governance would look like in relation to your religion, if you want to clarify, then I'm all ears.
Yeah, it would be a synergistic relationship between the church and the state. Like, okay. For instance, are you aware that in England they have a Church of England?
Yes.
Okay, are you aware that at our founding, that all of our colonies, all of them, post-founding, still had a state religion?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you know why that was the case?
Explain.
It's because secularists have no moral authority or autonomy. They have a do as thou wilt harm principle. So they can't really make ought claims. They don't make any sense. You say that secularists should be in charge. I say secularists should not be in charge because they have no moral or ethical epistemological foundation to make ought claims on anybody to do anything at any time, ever. They have a bizarre live and let live policy, which is really bad for governing a nation.
I did not say that secularists necessarily need to be in charge. I have no problem if a Christian is elected president of the United States, even though I don't practice Christianity.
As long as he does what?
So long as they serve the country in a way that lines up with my ideal version of governance.
Secular values.
It could be, but right. It could be a Muslim. It could be a Christian.
As long as he rules as a secularist, you don't care.
Still on his feet, which is very impressive. Boom, right into side control.
Sure, yes.
Now tell me what's actually immoral. Now can you? Yeah, great. Now,
yes.
Yeah. Now tell me what's actually immoral about the religious ruling from a religious prism and enacting law based around their religious values and not taking secularists into consideration at all.
I'm not making moral judgments about like what you would prefer. If you live in a Christian town and you guys democratically decide to pursue policies that line up with your Christian
let's say they didn't
ideology,
democratically do it.
Fine. That's just the way it is.
What's wrong if they don't want to democratically do it? What if they authoritarianly do it? What's your actual moral claim against that even?
Because my preference is democracy.
Oh, your preference. So your moral claim is your preference?
To the body and head.
Okay, so our liberal friend here has gotten himself into an inescapable logical trap. You see, his big critique of Andrew, and this is what they all sort of critique Andrew for, is that he is a religious zealot who wants to impose his worldview on everybody else. And in their enlightened secular worldview, everybody can just do what they want all the time, and everybody just gets to thrive, man.
Yes, I am into butthole sunning, aka butt-chugging sunlight, aka perineum sunning, aka anal chakra sunning, aka enlightening my brown eye with the sun.
And there are many different ways to attack this, but the way that Andrew has done this is that he's maneuvered this conversation in a way that makes this liberal admit that he and the secularists in fact aspire to do the same thing. They want to impose their worldview upon everyone else just as much as the Christian does.
So long as they serve the country in a way that lines up with my ideal version of governance.
Secular values.
It could be, but right. It could be a Muslim. It could be a Christian.
As long as he rules as a secularist, you don't care.
You cannot point your finger at the Christian and say, you're bad for wanting to impose your worldview on everybody else, and that's why you're bad. And then in the next breath, say the president can govern however they want as long as they govern according to my secular worldview. And then this argument becomes particularly bad when it's uncovered that he actually doesn't have a justification for why it is that we should follow his secular worldview besides his own preference. And this becomes abundantly clear throughout this entire exchange. And honestly, it just highlights this glaring, gaping flaw with moral relativism and subjectivism. If there is no objective truth, no right or wrong, no good or evil, and if everything is just subjective or based on our personal preferences, then you actually cannot provide a justification as to why your preferences are better than mine. The only thing that they can really say in this situation, and this is the logical trap, is that my preferences are better than your preferences, and the reason why they're better is because that's my preference.
My preference is to...
Oh, your preference. So your moral claim is your preference?
And this is why Andrew says that he can't make ought claims, because if he says that things ought to be X, then he has to have a justification for that. And the justification has to appeal to something outside of himself, something universal or something objective. And it can't just be because I want it that way. And now what this guy says, and what most secularists will appeal to, is what Andrew refers to as the do as thou wilt harm principle, which is an interesting way to turn that phrase. Because as far as I know, that's a nod to occultism, and particularly to the spiritual philosophy or religion of Aleister Crowley, the man who founded his own religion called Thelema, of which the central tenet was do as thou wilt be the whole of the law. This phrase suggests that individuals should pursue their own true will or purpose without being restricted by external authorities, social norms, or conventional morality in any way. And it stands in direct opposition to the Christian teaching that humans should seek to fulfill God's will, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, instead of their own desires, because following your own selfish desires will lead you to despair and is unnatural and unhealthy. In Crowley's case, it inevitably led him and his followers to extremely dark and graphic occult, satanic, spiritual, and sex rituals, to the point where, long story short, he got kicked out of Italy in 1923. Moreover, the harm principle refers to the moral or political principle that individuals should be able to do as they want as long as they're not harming anybody else. And this is most famously associated with John Stuart Mill, who in his work on liberty argues that society shouldn't intervene in one's own personal liberty unless it is directly harming another individual. And now the big problem with this is, what exactly do you mean by harm, and how do we quantify this? Can you actually show me what that is? Can you show me what harm is and how it manifests? And also, can you show me the degrees to which harm can affect people or a society? Is there a gradation to harm, or is it all just based purely upon a feeling? Take the issue of using pronouns, for example. People will say all the time, if you don't use my pronouns, that harms me and it harms my mental health or whatever.
Some people don't refer to themselves as ladies, but it's okay that you didn't know. And in a gay bar, so I should feel safe.
But then somebody could counter that by saying, if you try and make me call you they, them, you're making me lie, and that harms me. So now we're both being harmed. So I guess the question becomes, who's being harmed more? We're at a stalemate. And then ultimately, what it necessarily has to come down to is who has the most power. So, do as thou wilt harm principle, I like it. Maybe Andrew meant something different there. Maybe that was a completely unnecessary tangent. But that's my interpretations of it, so let's carry on.
Conversation is about... No! I thought this was going to be a conversation about what system you prefer versus what system I prefer.
And inside of a system of preferences, there should be some type of ought or justification for it outside of, because I want that. I just want that.
Smash his face. Let's go.
Your moral imperative is my preferences?
Who is straw man and who now? I didn't say that.
You said you want it because of your preferences. That's it.
I did not say that I prefer secularism simply because I prefer it. I can give you reasons why I prefer secularism, and
outside of your preferences. Let's do it.
I told you that my preference is a system that allows for multiple types of people. Mm-hmm. And when I look at America as a democratic experiment, I see success all over the country. It's not a perfect country. We could do better, but I see success all over the country. I think this is a really good system that we have here. This is a system that allows for people like you and me to exist and have the same
now I need you to know,
for example.
I need you to note this. And you can go back right this second. You can rewind your own tape and you can see it for yourself. You said in the span of 20 seconds, I did not say that my preferences are the thing which I am appealing to for why it is that I want this form of government. And then went on to say, but my preference is this form of government. So are you appealing to anything external to your own? Stop. Are you appealing to anything external to your own preferences, or aren't you?
No, I would appeal to social utility and my idea of what would be good in service of that goal. I was pushing back against your take that I want secularism simply because I want secularism.
And why ought we follow social utility?
My reason. We ought follow social utility because I believe in pursuing a system
because of your preferences, I believe.
That would be, in my opinion, the best outcome for individuals that exist within that system.
So that's your preferences
again. I try to maximize good outcomes according to what I believe, as I assume you do.
Those are all your preferences, bro.
Right into the full mount. I mean, that was a fantastic transition.
What are the differences between you and me? You have a preference.
I have apostolic. No, I have epistemic justification for knowledge. You do not have epistemic justification for knowledge. You can't justify how you even know a thing, let alone why we should govern with that thing. So as we move in to your preferences, my preferences, it's your preference that we follow your preference. That's your preference, right? But
it is
okay, it's my preference that we don't follow your preference, and that's my preference.
Great.
That's what you want?
That's the whole point.
So then how do we make the determination as to who is right?
We would get into the minutia of why we think our systems are better than the other person's system.
Because of our preferences.
Exactly.
Well, if it's just because of if there's no justification outside of what is preferable to the individual, it's my preference that I rule everybody. What's wrong with that?
That is your opinion. I disagree.
Well, wait a second. You can't disagree.
Yes.
My preferences are just as valid as yours.
I'm not disagreeing that you have a preference.
Yeah, but what makes it less valid than yours?
Best outcome for the people that live within this system.
What makes my preference less good than your preference?
When we're talking about something like affirming identities, we're talking about unaliving rates. We're talking about this thing called social stigma.
Yeah, what makes my preference less viable than your preference?
I'm trying to give you an example. So in this specific case, that is an outcome that I don't like. I don't like seeing people.
That's your preference again.
Unalive themselves.
Your preference again.
Or experience something like deep depression because of social stigma.
Don't you understand how ridiculous this is? Every time I ask you, why should we appeal to your preferences instead of mine for moral oughts? You say because it's my preference that you do so every single time. I believe he's saying my preference. Everything is my preference, my preference, my preference.
Tap, or he's going to break his arm. He's going to break his arm.
Do you have anything that you can justify this on outside of you? Should all moral oughts come from Hutch's brain and his preferences?
Brother, the justification that I'm giving you are things that exist outside of my experience. I'm not talking about my individual experience in this system. I'm talking about a system that most benefits everyone.
And why should we follow a system that benefits everyone?
Because we all want good outcomes in accordance with our philosophical underpinnings.
So our preferences?
Yes.
Heat up like chicken.
Yes, so then you're appealing to nothing more than your individual preferences. All of the world's morality and everything in it comes from Hutch's brain and his preferences. That's what's moral and immoral. Then give me a moral justification external your preferences and why we should follow them.
I believe that all morality is subjective. We don't derive it from, or I don't derive it from Scripture. I derive it from my experience as a human being, and my philosophy. The one thing that I try to lead with is empathy.
I don't like watch movie about love. Too much movie make your heart weak.
That's it. And this is something that I was taught when it came to Scripture, when we learned about Jesus' teaching. The two main rules that he gave was love the God your Father and love your neighbor. So even though I don't subscribe to Christianity at this point in my life, I still gleaned valuable lessons from the teachings of Christ. And I carry those teachings.
But that's all subjective preference, right?
Yes.
So if it's all subjective preference, and you can appeal to nothing outside of your own preference, Hutch's preference is the way the world ought to be because that's how he prefers it to be, then Andrew Wilson wants the world to be this way because I prefer it that way. Can you tell me why I'm wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong.
I'm not wrong.
Everybody has their own subjective take on what morality is.
So my preference then is just as valid as yours.
Morality from Scripture.
So then,
sure, it's valid. I'm not going to tell you it's invalid.
So if my preference is just as valid as yours, then how can you not agree? You just said it's just as valid as yours. What's there to disagree with?
What can I not agree with?
How can you disagree if my preferences are just as valuable as yours? How in the fuck could you disagree with them?
When we're talking about this sort of thing, what I'm telling you is that I don't doubt that you believe that your moral system is correct. So in that sense, it's valid.
No, you're saying my moral system is correct.
No.
Yes.
Not according to my
I'm sorry.
morality.
That's so weird. Yeah, I thought your preference was that all preferences are equal. Therefore, all moral systems are correct and equal.
No, I'm saying everybody has their own experience with these sorts of things.
Wait, what? Hang on. I'm sorry. Are my preferences valid or not?
They're valid in the sense that if you tell me that this is what you believe, I'm going to believe you. That doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with what you are proposing.
Yeah,
in terms of like
so then my preferences would be not as valid as yours, right?
No, I'm not saying that. No, everybody has their own perspective.
Okay, so it might seem a little bit repetitive here at times, but that's only because of the logical trap that this liberal has gotten himself caught in. And because he's caught in this trap, the conversation becomes cyclical, where he just keeps on having to appeal to his own preferences every time he's asked for a justification about his preferences. But the key moment there was when he said to Andrew, well, what's the difference between your preferences and my preferences? To which Andrew responds, with my preferences, I have epistemic justification. Now, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that is concerned with knowledge. What is knowledge? How do we know things? How can we justify what we know? Or how can we justify what we believe? Not to insult anyone's intelligence, but we'll go through an example quickly. The scenario is a belief about the weather. Belief, it will rain tomorrow. Justification, you check a reliable weather forecast predicting rain. That is epistemic justification. Now, if you say the belief is that it will rain tomorrow, the justification is that you simply have a feeling it will rain without any supporting evidence. That is a lack of epistemic justification. Sounds simple, but a lot of people these days do not understand this. Now, a more complicated one that's related to this debate. Belief. We should use Christian ethics to govern society as opposed to secularism. Justification. Divine revelation through the Bible, the various arguments for the existence of God, philosophical justifications, the benefit to humanity, etc., etc. As opposed to belief. We should govern with secular values and not Christian ethics. Justification, because I feel like it's better, because of my preferences. Now, let's watch the rest as the worldview continues to unravel, and just watch the blatant lack of any appeal to objectivity, any epistemic justification, and how Andrew is able to walk this liberal all the way to the very end of the absurd logical conclusion of his worldview.
It is not up to me to tell you or anybody else that it is invalid. Do you understand that?
No, I don't. Listen, that actually makes no sense. Here, I'll help you.
You want to live in a world where you can just tell me that this or this thing is invalid, and you'll probably
let me help you out.
This sort of thing.
Let me help you out with this so that you understand. There's Aztecs who are cutting out a man's heart on top of a pyramid, and they're going to kick his corpse down the steps based on their preferences.
Sure.
Are what they doing? What they are doing immoral?
According to me,
according to you and your preference. Hang on. Let's just walk through it so I can show you this so that you understand.
Yes.
According to your preferences, right?
Preferences is like one word, but sure, yeah, we can use that word.
So if it's immoral that they're doing this according to your preference, they ought not do it according to what you prefer, right?
They ought not do it because I don't think that snuffing out somebody's life before it's their time to die is a good thing.
Based on
human beings. My philosophy,
your preference,
is that my philosophy is that to be a human being on this planet is to be given a tremendous gift to witness what we can witness here, and because of that, I want everybody to experience the same thing that I've experienced when I go to like Yosemite, for example.
He can say whatever he wants. When alcoholic, someone drunk guy talk, nobody cares about him.
And you can't do that if you sacrifice someone on an altar because it's an eclipse or something.
Is that because you would prefer that they don't?
Sure, yes.
Can you appeal to anything outside of your preference?
No, not really.
So then great. No. So then if they justify and say this is our preference and we appeal to nothing outside of our own preference, how could they possibly be wrong?
They're wrong according to me.
Yeah, but you're wrong. Okay, I get it, but that doesn't actually make sense. Because unless you're saying that your preferences are the ultimate arbiter of all morality, then their preferences have to be just as valid as your own, sir.
When we use words like valid,
you're not going to answer to it.
When we use words like valid, I'm not telling you that I think it's the correct thing to do. So if I say your experience with morality is valid, that's not the same thing as me saying I think that would be best for my community, the country that I live in, the state that I live in, etc.
Is that a subjective preference?
Is what a subjective preference?
That when you say X, that means Y.
Can you relate that back to what I just said?
Yeah, we'll relate it back to what you just said.
Yes.
Try to understand this.
Yes,
If you make the claim that your preferences, the ones that you want to see all oughts derive from your preferences, that would mean you would be the ultimate authority and arbiter of what is moral and immoral. If you are to say that somebody, stop, let me finish. If you are to say somebody else's preferences are just as valid as yours, that would be saying that they also are the ultimate arbiters of what is moral. So either one of you are wrong or both of you are wrong.
So I think where we're missing each other is I don't pretend to be the arbiter of morality, the ultimate arbiter of morality in this country, in my city, in the world. I don't expect that everybody follow what I believe in. I am not trying to foist that on everybody around me. You seem to think that that's what I am lobbying for.
That has nothing to do with what I just said. Let's assume for a second.
You just said a moment ago, you just called me the ultimate arbiter.
No, dude, this is just a logical extension of your position is what I'm trying to show you. Regardless of if you don't want to be the ultimate arbiter or you do want to be the ultimate arbiter, you believe that all morality stems from your own preferences, right?
Everybody has their own subjective experience with morality.
And are yours better than theirs?
No.
They're not, right? Then all morals are equal then.
I'm not saying that I don't think that there are certain philosophies of morality that I don't consider mine to be better than. I'm not saying that. But I'm not
which
saying
ones are better than yours?
But I'm not saying that I necessarily believe that I'm right about everything or that I should decide how a society should conduct themselves morally.
Oh, okay, got it. So then you're not going to make any ought claims ever again about how society should conduct itself morally, right?
Let's talk now.
No, I'm going to tell you my preference.
And should anybody ever follow your preference? Should anybody ever follow it?
My preference would be, for example, that people respect someone's preferred pronouns. That's my preference.
Got it. Should people follow Should people follow your preferences?
Of course, I would like to see that, but
they ought to do that.
I don't delude myself. Have that same level of comfort. I can just simply tell you
I get it. I understand. I understand your position. Ought people follow your preferences?
Position that it is doing more harm to you.
Ought people follow your preferences or not?
I would like to see people in this world live a life that is
still not answering the question. It's a yes or no question.
Empathy.
It's not even a loaded question. Ought people follow your preferences or not?
That would be my preference. Yes.
So yes, they should follow your preference, right? Should they follow your preference above everybody else's?
That's a personal decision that everybody has to make.
That's not my question. Ought they follow? You don't know if they should follow your preferences, but you just said they should.
I reject your premise because my goal is not to proselytize my personal sense of morality to the world.
You just got done saying people ought to follow it. What are you talking about?
But I don't go into it with the expectations that I can force that on everybody.
So everybody ought to follow your moral preferences except everybody who shouldn't?
Oh my God, bro. I feel like we're getting very lost in the sauce.
We are, because I keep on trying to explain this simple concept.
Very different concepts to each other right now.
Do you know why Rob Noor told you to talk to me when it came to this stuff? This is why. Because he knew that you're a dumbass and you need to be educated on this. So that you understand, I'm going to try to help you out. This is why it's becoming a circle. It's a lot of fun to do to you, but you're caught in a logic trap, and you can't get your way out. I'm not going to let you out until you make the concession that you're the ultimate arbiter of all that is good.
So an absolutely brutal demolition there, and a really interesting one to watch, particularly how this secularist gets caught in these logical traps. And if you're ruthless with it like Andrew, then you just stay in full mount and you just ground and pound until eventually they have to kind of just yield. And just on the Ort claims again, I mean, the key there was that he was saying that society ought to be run a certain way. Society ought to be run by secularists and in a secular way. And it's something that he's debating on the internet about. He feels a certain way about this. And if you say that something ought to be a certain way, it's very different to saying, I would prefer it if things were this way. An Ort claim is prescriptive and it needs to be grounded in some sort of values or principles or ethical standards. And you actually need to justify it through moral reasoning. But if you say that we should do X because that's my preference and I would just prefer it that way, no real justification for it, it's just the way that I like to do things, then sure. I mean, you can be safely ignored and maybe go outside and play in the sandpit or something. But anyways, guys, if you made it this far and if you would like to see me do the full 4-hour debate on stream, then just comment below saying full debate and I'll read through them. And if I get enough of a consensus, and if I get enough people who want me to do that, then I will do that. But otherwise, if you want to check it out, crucible.video down below. And if you want to do some Christmas shopping for some just unbelievably based merch, reality-based store will all be below there. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.